very much. So my name is Margaret Heldring, and I am the executive director of Grandmothers for Gun Responsibility. I come to this national organization, which is now about to have its first birthday after uh, 12 years as the founder and most of those years the chair of a group called Grandmothers Against Gun Violence in Washington State. And that is where I had the great honor and joy of meeting Ilana. She found us and invited a podcast, and we've been a team in the grandmother movement ever since. So I'm very grateful for that. Grandmothers for Gun Responsibility is working to recruit grandmothers all across the country, grandfathers too, grand elders as well. And we know that we are so inspired by the experiences and lessons of women from different countries all around the world. That is one of the things that I have most appreciated and loved about Ilana is her global perspective and her global community and always welcoming people into it. So today we wanted to invite Ilana, and we did, of course. Here she is. I'm going to ask her to introduce herself in a moment, and her colleague and friend Ellen, two women from Canada who have been very active leaders in the Grandmothers to Grandmother work campaign in Canada, which is part of the Stephen Lewis Foundation. This is the most inspiring campaign that I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, so you will hear about in a moment, but they have clearly found resonance with people, women, everybody, people across Canada and beyond Canadian borders. So we welcome you, Ilana. We welcome you, Ellen. We are grateful for your time. We're excited to hear your stories and learn from you. And we will take Q&A. Please put your questions in the chat toward the end. Or I don't know, Ilana and Ellen, if you want people to raise a hand, and since we're small, okay, raise a hand if you have a question as we go along. And also on our Zoom here, without just a C showing, is Cheryl Green, who is a member of our board of directors, and Liana Mons Redmond and Sophie Garner. There's Cheryl. Liana waved her hand. Sophie's going to wave her hand. Liana is our operations manager, and Sophie is our, I always forget what titles we use, but director of partnerships and communications. So we three are the staff, and we are hard at work and excited to learn and share. So Ilana, oh, Cindy McKenzie has joined us. Oh, here come a few more people.
Wonderful. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. I'm going to go on mute. I mean, on video.
Okay. Cindy is a member of our communications committee. And Cindy and Jacqueline, if you would be so kind as to put in the chat where you are, we're really enjoying seeing the geographic distribution. That would be wonderful. Okay, Ilana, Ellen, welcome.
Thank you, Margaret. Hello, everyone. And many of you I've met as I've been so delighted to serve on the advisory council for the group. But today I'm going to talk about with Ellen, we're going to share with you the experience of the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign of the Stephen Lewis Foundation in Canada. And I think, and I'm hoping that there'll be some really useful lessons learned and parallels and conversations and things to think about today and into the future from the campaign. I guess I'm going to be totally relaxed. I never actually tried to be a teacher in my life. I've never taught summer school or anything else. So I'm just going to chat with you and share with you what is a 20-year journey. The Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign at the Stephen Lewis Foundation is almost about 20 years old now. We started first in 2006. And just to give you a very quick overview, but really quick, like a 1 minute thumbnail sketch of a 20-year journey, which is that the Stephen Lewis Foundation was formed to address the crisis of the AIDS pandemic in Eastern and Southern Africa, which was raging like a wildfire across the continent. And millions of people, of course, as you know, were losing their lives. And when we started the foundation in the early 2000s, the pandemic was at its nadir, and there were no drugs available, and it was really a dire and terribly upsetting situation. And one of the things that we learned was that it was grandmothers who were stepping into the breach, losing any to all 2 to 10 of their adult children, and then the next day having to get up and care for and take on the responsibility and burden of care for their grieving grandchildren at the same time that they were grieving without any time to recover. And so I, as the director of the foundation at that time, started talking to people to say, look, these grandmothers at community level are being supported by community-driven and community-led organizations, but there's no money trickling down to the family and community level. How are we going to support them? They're starting their own support groups. And everyone said to me, and it really was everyone, said to me, grandmothers, old women, that's not a sustainable investment. Or they said, well, come back when it's 500,000 grandmothers. We're not interested in just a couple of groups here and there. Now, happily, many years later, there are tens and tens of thousands of grandmothers everywhere. But at the time, and I'm really doing a truncated version so we can get on to some of the things we can share with you that I think will be germane to the wonderful work and important work that you are doing. Um, what I decided in that moment was that perhaps grandmothers and older women who were of grandmothering age, grandothers, as they named themselves in the movement in Canada, maybe they would rally to the call to support and stand in solidarity with African grandmothers who are really at the epicenter of the response to the pandemic in their families and communities. And surely enough, they did. In a most remarkable way that Ellen and I will share with you. Ellen's really the expert because Ellen Monahan, who's sitting with the beautiful African material behind her, Ellen actually started one of the groups in Canada. So just to turn it over to Ellen in a moment, the way that we started what is called the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign was through initially a gathering of bringing African grandmothers together with Canadian grandmothers so that Canadian grandmothers could bear witness to, listen, and learn from the lived experience and expertise of the African grandmothers who were really the experts on their own lives and what needed to happen in their own families and communities. I thought maybe we'd get maybe 150 Canadian grandmothers who would be interested in a solidarity campaign, help raise some funds, raise some awareness about the importance of grandmothers in the response to the AIDS pandemic. And very soon, very quickly, there were 10,000 grandmothers. There were over 100 groups within short order. Now it sort of went from 100 to 200 to 300. There were groups across Canada. They have, in the last 15 to 20 years, raised well over $40 million. That's gone straight into the hands of community-driven organizations led by and for African grandmothers. And it's, I think, where there are some really interesting parallels for us to explore today is around the extraordinary unleashed power of grandmother and grandotherhood, the incredible solidarity that formed not just between grandmothers here and in Southern and Eastern Africa, but also between and amongst the Canadian grandmothers, what has developed as a result, what happened when grandmothers and grandothers came together in common cause. So we're just going to explore, Ellen and I, some of the lessons that we've learned, some of the beautiful things that emerged that we never would have thought up ourselves, how fundraising became community building and not fundraising. So there's some interesting things that we thought we'd love to share with you today. And I'm going to ask you, Ellen, to introduce yourself. Just take a minute to introduce yourself so everyone knows you. And then Ellen and I have sort of devised a sort of conversation between us. And then I have some slides and some groovy videos, and I'm going to do a multimedia quite ambitious thing for me presentation. So if you see me look to the side, I'm looking on my phone where I've made some notes. I'm not looking away. Ellen, please take it away because you're really one of the inspirations for all of us with grandmothers who actually and grandothers who actually started groups and created a movement out of what originated as a campaign.
Thanks so much, Elena. And I must comment that you always have been a teacher for many of us.
Thank you.
So, just very briefly, my background is that, starting in 2005, I had had a career as a social worker and a stint as a stay-at-home mom. And when our two children were away at university, really, I felt some freedom to try and look for new challenges. And one of the things I really wanted to do was to go overseas to volunteer. However, fate intervened, and my husband had a major stroke. But I realized very quickly that I really needed to find something outside the home to keep me from being isolated as a caregiver. So, Purses for Africa was born. I started making fabric purses, selling them at our local farmers market, and donating them to the newly founded Stephen Lewis campaign. I must admit, those first purses, some of them were pretty awful, but women really loved the cause. And so they bought the purses, and I did get better. So that was the start. A good friend of mine, a close friend, quickly joined me, started making purses, and all of a sudden we kept adding our friends, and we even started adding customers who wanted to become involved. So that was tremendous. And then in 2006, when the Grandmothers Campaign actually started, we became Ujamaa Grandmas. And since then, we've grown from this small group to more than 600 women Calgary-wide who have been working with our African women partners. So that's where we're
Thanks,
at
Ellen.
today.
Thanks, Ellen. And I'm going to share, let's hope everything works perfectly. I'm going to share my screen and you'll all nod at me if you can see it. I'm not going to put it in presentation mode, which I could because it's easier to navigate this way, but you can all see it. It's all good. Um, so this is just this tree. I just saw someone else talking about this online. This tree is this is called yarn bombing, and it's something that the South African grandmothers developed, which was a form of protest and awareness raising. And they knit squares and they cover sometimes whole cars or whole trucks, but usually it started with trees. Quite a symbolic thing. Now, here's what I wanted to do. You'll bear with me. It's a 3.5 4 minute video, and it's a video that we made for a book that we put together on the campaign called Powered by Love. So you'll forgive the promotional piece of it. It's 1 second at the beginning. I can't cut it out because I'm not proficient enough at video, but I did want to show it to you only. And the reason I thought I would show this to you is two things. One is that, and also a confession. I'm related to the one of the youngsters who sort of wrote and sang. But one of the things we did is we went to young people who were sort of in and around all of the grandmothers and grandothers, and we invited them in at different moments. And the grandmothers groups and grandmothers groups have also done a lot of sort of multi-generational work, more than intergenerational. This was just one of those moments where we said we need a song. Grandmothers and grandothers are doing flash mobs. We have so much joy. There's a lot of music in this movement, a lot of inspiration from the African grandmothers who bring music to protest and who also are living in the midst of heartbreaking, breathtakingly sad and disturbing and difficult and powerfully heartbreaking crisis, not unlike and almost exactly like the heartbreak of gun violence and loss and death, and at the same time bring an extraordinary amount of resilience and joy and sisterhood, companionship, and hope through that. And so music and images of strength and resilience and coming together in common cause and purpose just seems part and parcel of how we manage all of this and get through it, and also inspire one another to keep hopeful and determined. So I'm going to play the video. If you need to turn away for a second because you've got something else, I can't control the volume. So on your end, turn it down if it's too loud. But this just gives you a sense of the spirit of it, and I thought that was important. And also, just to be honorable about the work that was done. it also brings the African grandmothers into the room, which in the context of this campaign, of course, is so important because they are at the center of the narrative, the center of the response. I don't want to talk about the campaign on the Canadian side where we can share lessons learned and whatnot without honoring their centrality to the purpose of the campaign. So here we go. Here is a song written by the youngsters for the grandmothers and grandmothers.
Powered by
Oops.
Maybe
Sorry.
restart.
powered by we are powered
Oh, I'm sorry.
by love. Stand tall, put some love in your heart. Let your passion beat as one. The magic power of love. We are people of the same mind, a bind as pure as gold. Let the movement move inside your veins and let the truth be told. And stand tall, put some love in your heart. Let your passion beat as one. The magic power of love. Grandmothers loving children of the world. This ain't a moment, it's a movement. And let me tell you, honey, see our actions ring out through every boy and girl. The time to stand has just begun. So stand tall and put some love in your heart. Let your passion beat as one. The magic power of love. See, we're never truly alone in this world. Our fight carries us through, but only if we're unified. So grab the person next to you and tell them to stand tall. Put some love in your heart. Let your passion beat as one. The magic power of love. We stand together, grandmothers shoulder to shoulder. Show us that we can all make a difference. Grandmothers, guardians of the future, working for change, tireless, bringing health and happiness. Never give up. 1, 2, 3, stand tall. Put some love in your heart. Let your passion beat as one. The magic power of love. Stand tall and put some love in your heart. Everybody, let your passion be one. The magic power of love. Powered by we are powered by love.
Wow.
Okay. I hope you could hear that because I could not on my.
Rana, that was great.
I've heard it 1,000 times. In any event, part of you see the reason for sharing it is just to share one of the things that a grandmother said to me from South Africa, from Khayelitsha, many, many years ago, was she said to me, I know that you think that because we're grandmas, We love, and that's what we have to give. We embody love. We are love for our grandchildren. But actually, love is a force. It's a powerful force for change. And we don't want you to feel self-conscious about it. It's not like a nice sort of lovey-dovey kind of love that we're talking about. We're talking about the power of love. And it just stayed in my head forever. Just how wonderfully evocative it was, but also how it sort of it 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 put an infused a kind of beauty and love and gravitas to the kind of energy, the kind of special properties or alchemy that older women in particular were bringing to activism and to change. And the fact that they talked about love as sort of a force behind all of that and not as something that was sort of for a Hallmark card, to use our terminology, to me was a very powerful harbinger of change. So I wanted to sort of bring you in, Ellen, and one of the things that we worked on a lot that I thought would be useful to share or interesting to share was that one of the ways that grandmothers and grandothers, I think, were so compelled by the campaign and by the urgency of the cause wasn't just that they had counterparts and peers in another part of the world who were being largely abandoned or not even seen by the rest of the world, but also that the the deep concern about the terrible loss of life and what that meant for children and grandchildren and the next generations and who was going to care for them and who was going to love them and nurture them into the future, that was something that resonated for everyone. And I think one of the things that we learned from the Canadian grandmothers and the African grandmothers at the foundation was how important it was in the midst of stories and narrative that was largely about loss and death and a lot of helplessness and a feeling of hopelessness, that there was a way to come together and to meet the challenge of this extraordinarily difficult story that was unfolding, and do it with purpose and dignity and determination, but also infused with the extraordinary sort of benefits of coming together in community, in common cause. And the grandmothers and older women were exemplifying and leading the way in terms of modeling for the rest of us how to do that and how to deal with something that was filled with so much despair and difficulty, how to have these redemptive moments of hope and joy and resilience. And so I just wanted to ask Ellen to talk for a moment, because Ellen was really one of the people who started a group and who had that unique experience of talking to other women who may have never heard about AIDS in Africa, may have never been involved in activism before, and how you went about it, Ellen, and just some of the lessons that you can share in terms of, what was it that worked and what was special about grandmother and older women's organizing efforts.
Hey, I think I realize that older women, I think most of us, or many of us, come to a point in our lives when things have kind of evened out, and we want to get more involved in different things, and perhaps quite different things that we're really passionate about. And for certainly the women in our group, we became very passionate about working with and for the African grandmothers. And we did have ample opportunity to actually meet some of these African women, which just really made it so much more real to us and important for us. And, I think older women do reach a certain point in their life quite often, when really they may be retired and their children have gone off. They're grown, they don't need their mother so much anymore. And perhaps some of these women have lost a spouse or close friends, and just things have really changed in our lives. And I think it's a time of really women looking for other things to make their life really whole again and to try and different things. So, and I think with actual grandmothers, when they do have grandchildren, then they really begin to realize that really they want a different world, a peaceful world, a happy world for their grandchildren to grow up in. Um, but having said that, and Leilani, if I'm straying off topic, just bring me back, okay? But I think having said that, the term grandmother has to be all inclusive. So I do have to make a plug here for all those women who are older now and they want to be grandmothers, but there's certainly a growing a number in this country where they will never be grandmothers simply because their children are choosing not to have children for a variety of different reasons. And so, but it's interesting because I mean, these older women are looking for something else in their lives, but I've had more than a number of women come up to me being curious about our group, but saying to me, but do I have to be an actual grandmother to join? And I always kind of laugh and say, oh my goodness, no. And we welcome them with open arms because they have so much to give. So, you know, and there's certainly an additional benefit for the actual women in this country because they're coming together to work for a common cause that they're really passionate about. And it results in a number of things. I think, we end up making friends at a time in our life when it's much more difficult to make friends. And as well, I've certainly seen in our group that we do become a support group for other older women who have joined us. And, as we age, we lose loved ones, we have health issues, we even have dementia. But the group in Canada really comes together to be a support group. So I think we're not only working for the African grandmothers and in solidarity with them, but also we're developing ourselves in our own groups here in this country. So, Ilana, does that answer your question?
Yeah, beautifully. And I think that one of the things that I was thinking about, and I hope this is useful to everyone in the group, was that we really did have a lot of experience going from, no groups to hundreds of groups. How did they start? How did we get them to start? And I want to make sure in the short time that we have, because we're sort of smushing 15 years or more into a few minutes, but I want to make sure that we talk about fundraising for sure, because I think that had an unexpected, many unexpected byproducts that we should talk about today. But one of the things I wanted to talk about with Ellen.
Ilana,
Yeah.
let me rudely interrupt for just
Please,
one
not at
minute.
all. Yeah.
Could you lower or close the screen so we can see?
Of course. Sorry.
Thank you. There we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me.
Mhm.
One of the things that I thought might be helpful is to just talk about how did groups get started. I mean, and that's why I sort of tried to talk for just a second to allude to, how do you get groups started when you're talking about something that can be very painful? A lot of people want to shy away from it. I feel like there are parallels between the topic or the issues around gun violence and gun responsibility and talking about HIV and AIDS in Africa. There may not be a direct line in terms of the nature of the scourges that exist, but how you get people to turn toward it and think about it and engage with it when there's so much difficulty in the world, and it's easier perhaps to sort of know about it but not get deeply engaged with it. That was a big question for us. And Ellen has a lot of expertise because she started a group, and I thought it might be useful to talk about, well, how did we get people to talk about this? How did we go to people? Where did we find older women to get engaged? And there were just as many grandmothers as there were at the height of the campaign a few years ago. There were 10,000 women at some point across Canada. we went to, and Ellen, I'll invite you to comment as well. We started in many different ways. We went to church groups. We found quilting groups and book clubs, and we went to groups that were already working on issues that they were interested in around poverty or around food security. So we went to many different places. We just engaged at community level, and just found other and made it known that there was a group that was going to meet, and that wasn't really done from the center. It wasn't really done from the Stephen Lewis Foundation sitting in Toronto. That was done by women like Ellen, who were interested, were engaged, found out more, and then there were sort of champions in a sense, or women who just were willing to take on the initial work of finding a group to speak with, to meet with, going to different places and talking to people just randomly. Ellen will go into much more detail about this. But it meant that we didn't always go to the most obvious place. Sometimes there were obvious places because there were already women and people talking about the issue itself. But we also went to places where we knew there were older women who had so many skills, so much life experience, but really didn't have an outlet or weren't being invited into a space to contribute. And that had many different iterations, from community fairs to book sales to places where we knew, to libraries where we knew older women were congregating or meeting one another, but weren't being invited into the civic space to have their own voice and to get involved. So, Ellen, I'll ask you, because you actually went through the whole journey of starting a group, what it is that you did and what was interesting.
So I think, in the way we started it, and I will just use this as an example, it was really a small group of women who were talking about what was happening in Africa with the AIDS pandemic, which was very much in the news in 2006. And from that, it seemed very easy to keep going and form a group and then figure out how we could help in what we saw as very tiny ways, but at least we had the passion to try and do that. And so you're right, Elena. I think, a lot of these groups grew out of places where women congregated, like book clubs and knitting and fabric quilting groups and that kind of thing. Um, so basically, I think we came to realize that you actually start where women are at. So if you have a group of quilters, if you can wheedle your way into having them invite you as a speaker, and that works really well. So what happened was that in our early days, we would agree to do almost anything that was legal, and like going out to speak to different groups, and that just grew the movement very, very quickly. And another thing that I think we did in the early days when we went out to meeting different women, we would, by the end of the session, we would always have sign-up sheets so that if women were interested in pursuing this further, they could sign their names. Usually they would give their email address. Now, getting phone numbers was sometimes a bit more difficult, but we didn't insist on that. But if we did, we would come out of an event. For instance, early on we went to the jazz festival here in Calgary. They gave us a table, so we used that to talk to people, sign up people, but most importantly, get them to sign up on a sheet so we could follow up with them. Quite often, women say, "Yes, we'll follow up with you," and of course, don't. However, if you quite soon after meeting them, give them a very friendly phone call with no pressure, just saying, "Oh, we met you at so and so, and we just want to follow up with you." That was really a way of drawing people into our groups and really becoming extremely great volunteers. And and another thing that we did in our follow-up for people, we also would send them an email and ask them if they want to continue with the group. Are there certain talents that they might bring to the group, and what were they? And that has been a real boon for us, being able to look back on those phone calls and those sheets of signing up for talent and volunteering and stuff. And really, we would approach people to be on our board, for instance, or to take part in a certain volunteer activity. So it was a very easy way of reaching out to women, but also making them feel very important, that, this was that we really wanted them in our group, and that they were very valuable members of society and of our group. Um, so yeah, that part actually wasn't all that hard. And I think it just really fostered a sense of friendship, of wanting to work together. And it has worked extremely well for us. So it does seem daunting in the beginning, but actually it isn't.
I think, and just I'm watching the time because I do want to give time for questions. So, Margaret, I was going to jump into some fundraising. Do you have something you want
Yes,
to?
I have a question, but I will hold it. That's fine.
Well,
Yeah.
let's see if we get to it, and if
Okay.
we answer it as we go. But if we don't, Ellen, you and I will speak for another 10 minutes or so, and then we'll leave 10 minutes for
Sure.
questions.
Wonderful.
I wanted to jump to fundraising because I mean, we're really skimming over things. So does it seem obvious that you would go to places where women were already congregating? It probably seems obvious to all of you. You've probably done quite a bit of this. I think that the outreach part of it really did require a couple of women like you, Margaret, starting Grandmothers Against Gun Violence, that just were determined and clear and focused and just kept at it consistently. I think what we said in the beginning, sort of the urgency of the messaging. One of the things that really stymied a lot of women, and they talked a lot about this in the beginning, is I'm not an expert on HIV and AIDS in Africa. I've never been to the continent. I don't know anything about HIV and AIDS. It resonates deeply with me that older women and grandmothers are raising 15 million children orphaned by AIDS and aren't being seen or talked about or heard by the rest of the world. But I'm not an expert. I don't feel capable or qualified to go out and talk to others about it. This is something I really could imagine with the issue of gun violence as well, and gun responsibility. And I think that one of the deep lessons for us was that, first of all, you don't have to be an expert, but also that when we really looked at what was compelling older women, grandmothers, grandothers to be involved, was where it resonated for them. The deep agony of the thought of losing adult children and getting up the next day and raising some or all of your grandchildren on your own. Even if you weren't an expert on HIV and AIDS, even if you've never been to the continent, that was something that resonated deeply. Women could imagine themselves in that position as older women and grandmothers. And I think that sometimes we try to explain so much and put so much information and expertise into the hands of everybody. Okay, here's all the stats on HIV and AIDS. Here's the epidemiology. Here's what it is as a medical. Here's how you deal with it. Here's the that in some ways by trying to give so much information and factual information and scientific information so that people felt equipped, we didn't tap into, and we really learned this from the grandmothers themselves who taught me, that actually it's the human. It's the deeply human imperative. It's the deeply human connection, that the science of HIV and the different kinds of drugs that were not available on the continent and more available in North America, that was all useful information, which the groups definitely took and uplifted and did a lot of awareness raising and became experts themselves. But the first thing that compelled people was not a barrage of information to become an expert about HIV and AIDS in Africa. I think around gun responsibility and gun violence, that's something to really think about too. It's like, how do you tap into that? Older women and grandmothers already have a deep, urgent feeling. As I get older, I'm feeling it more and more myself, a deep, urgent feeling for the improving of the human condition, the preservation of precious lives, the safety of our children and grandchildren. This is the deep connection and the expertise that everyone will get eventually. Some will become experts on all sorts of things, but it's that immediate sort of visceral feeling of connection and then coming together with other women who feel it too. What we saw and experienced was that that was the real spark. The issue was equally important. It's why people were coming together, but it wasn't intimidating. It was intimidating enough to come together with strangers. You didn't also need to be an expert. And I think, Ellen, I learned this from you early on. I remember a conversation that you may not many, many years ago where they there were different groups starting something called a speakers bureau because there were grandmothers and grandothers who wanted to speak about the issues, but they'd never done public speaking. They didn't feel comfortable getting up in front of a group or a crowd. And so the grandmothers and grandothers themselves started a speakers bureau to help each other and encourage each other and share knowledge about how to formulate speaking notes and how to be a leadership in a group. Some groups had leaders, some groups had treasurers and chairwomen, and some did not. Some were more free floating. So I think that's the other thing as we move into fundraising, Ellen, that I sort of wanted to have you talk about is that the the acceptance of many, the sort of encouragement around fundraising because there was so much anxiety around asking for money, doing fundraising. It wasn't that this was never meant to be a fundraising campaign. Of course, part of the imperative was to have funds for the African grandmothers. But what we learned and what Ellen said to me so many years ago about, the grandmothers and grandothers have all the skills. They actually can teach and support one another in everything that has to be done here. And then sort of taught us at the foundation, at the center of what would be useful for us to do in order to support you, Ellen, right? And then with the fundraising, I thought it was just going to be fundraising, and it turned out that the fundraising actually became a place where so many grandmothers and grandothers were actually joining the movement.
Mhm.
Because those fundraising events, and I'm going to put up a picture, but Ellen, you're going to talk about it, became a place of congregation. And
Mhm.
while we thought it was raising money and it was all very anxious making, it actually became extraordinarily wonderful and innovative and creative events, which really pulled in many more women because they were able to go to fabric sales, bike-a-thons, Scrabble marathons. I'm going to put up a picture, and Ellen, why don't you take it away and spend 5 minutes and just share what happened?
Hey, well, I think, first of all, yeah, it was anxiety provoking when we felt we really didn't know a lot about the issues and so forth. But really, we jumped into fundraising quite happily because it was fun. Now, I think some people think perhaps fundraising is rather daunting, but in essence, it isn't. And we all started. Where we were at. And, I see this picture of the gang in Edmonton in their motorcycle outfits. Well, they paired with a motorcycle club and did a fundraising with them. There was the Scrabble events is another of these pictures. The major biking event that's run every year in Victoria that raises a lot of money. But I think we learned very quickly that actually fundraising could become our reason for being, and we love doing it. And we actually use the talents and the things that we wanted to do in life. Like, originally we attracted a lot of knitters and fiber artists and, just people who sewed or whatever. It was a very comfortable way of getting into fundraising, doing things that we loved. Yet boy, some of these things really blossomed into big money makers. And of course, we all became very proud of being able to raise money. And so I think that actually became a centerpiece for many of the groups. Yes, we were con very concerned and involved with the African grandmothers, but we also felt that we were actually doing something that could benefit them. So yeah, that continues to this day, and some of our fundraisers get bigger and better and become very well known in our communities. So that has been extremely useful. So yeah, think, if groups start where they're at and do things that they likely have already been doing in their other volunteer activities or during their earlier life. Perfect example is we were invited by our Justice Film Festival here in Calgary to bring a bake sale to the international market, the Justice Film Festival, which is a major event. Well, we all rolled our eyes because, of course, we had all been baking and doing bake sales for kids in schools and stuff. We didn't want to do it. However, we did do it because we could. And boy, that over the years has been a money maker, but it's also really made our group become much more visible. So, even the small things in fundraising really have the potential to go off in all sorts of maybe weird and wonderful directions. The fabric sale that I mentioned, again, it started very small. The first year, we actually earned $17,000, and we thought that was absolutely superb. That we were so proud of ourselves. Well, now just recently in our recent sale, we made more than we made 180,000 with a fabric sale with donated fabrics from women and companies. So, I would encourage any groups starting out to start out small. You likely have people within, at least one or two people within your group who really have creative ideas, and go from there. And even if some of the early ideas sound a bit wingy to you, just go for it and see what happens with it. So fundraising does not have to be terrifying or daunting. And in the end, you actually can end up having a great deal of fun. And I'll just mention one thing that we did. Women quite often have tea parties, so you have strawberry teas and so forth. Well, our group decided that was a bit tame. So we would do gin with granny. Well, that was really popular, and it was just individual members having little quotes cocktail parties, and we had gin slushies. But by having these little events, we were able to talk to people about our cause. So certainly we got donations, but we also got more members. And again, it blossomed into a much greater thing. So
I think I love that, Ellen. Your group's done so many innovative things, as has others. I mean, the Scrabble group has a manual that's like this thick manual of how to have a successful Scrabble tournament. They raise 100,000 in a night. There were grandmothers and grandothers who were like, we don't want to make crafts and bakes, so we're going to do a biking marathon, which you saw a picture of. And so they bike tens of 50 kilometers and they also raise 100,000. I think the point here that I thought would be really helpful to share with you is what Ellen's saying, is that we were thinking of it as fundraising. The groups were thinking of it as fundraising. There was a lot of trepidation about fundraising. Actually, what happened was that those were mini events, many, many, mini events, which started from the imperative to raise funds to get into the hands of grandmothers in Africa raising orphaned grandchildren and their community organizations, which did happen and has been very powerful for almost 2 decades. But in addition to that, what we realized was that those events were community building, constituency building, awareness raising opportunities, just as Ellen was saying. And so we sort of flipped the switch in terms of a paradigm shift of how we were thinking of it. All of us, grandmothers teaching the foundation supporting the grandmothers. Then they decided, at one point we decided to have a national piece, which was Stride to Turn the Tide of AIDS. And grandmothers did virtual stride walks and actual stride walks. And so then people saw grandmothers and grandothers and older women walking through communities, small communities, rural communities, big cities. And it raised people's awareness, but it also piqued women's interest. Oh, I can join. That's something I'd like to do. So I just think the diversity of skills and talents and creativity is limitless. The energy of all of the grandmothers and grandmothers. One of the things I just finished doing a different workshop with around young men and feminism. And one of the interesting things that emerged was that the generosity of older women to each other, understanding each other's life circumstances, that sometimes women had to step back because they were looking after grandchildren so their daughter could go to work, or they had a spouse who was unwell, that there wasn't sort of resentment, or you said you do this, or she hasn't turned up to meetings, that there was just a fluidity and an
Mm,
acceptance of life intervening. That
mm,
was a very special thing that I think I have never seen anywhere else but in older women's organizing and older women's mobilization, is the ability to really generously and with a full heart accept different ways of coming in and out. So someone could step away for 6 months and come back and be just as comfortable and embraced. So there were just many lessons that we learned, that from what started off as a sort of fundraising idea and a solidarity idea became a community building and constituency building and local support and awareness and mobilization on a massive scale. So yeah, I'm done with mine. Go ahead, Ellen, and then we'll take a couple of
I
questions.
just wanted to add, Ilana, that I think you touched on a really important part in that when we have people, women volunteering for us, we make it very clear that, we do have monthly gatherings, but there's no compunction for you to attend. And because older women have so much else happening in their lives, they may be a caregiver, they may be looking after grandchildren and so forth, that we really say to them, show up when you can, show up when you might be interested in a particular event. And but there's no you don't have to show up for a certain number of meetings. And my own fear in joining a new group throughout my life was that they would make me secretary, because it always seemed groups were looking for a secretary. Um, so we really focus on that you volunteer your time as you can, as you're able. We have members who say to us, and we do check our membership fairly regularly, saying, do you still want to be a member? Because a lot of people don't show up in the 600. And most often people say, well, I can't volunteer right now. I can't do anything right now because of whatever. But, in the coming years, I likely will show up. And that's great. So I think it's really important to encourage women to take that approach.
mhm, mhm.
Well, we could go on for another hour, but I'd love to make
Yeah.
sure that if there's anyone who has a question. We did leave out a whole piece, which another time we'll talk about, which was regional leaders and regional meetings, which really took some of the pressure off the center, and the local groups to sort of have regional meetings was extraordinarily important. So there's lots that we can share over time, but is there anything that Margaret, you had a question? I don't want to leave you out.
Well, let me pause before mine because I have to actually remember it too.
Sorry, Margaret. Sorry.
It was a few wonderful comments ago.
Sorry.
I have several reactions, but I do want to open it up to see if anyone else has a question at this point. Okay.
No, we've inundated you with information.
Well,
Is
and that's what I basically want to comment on. Everything you both have said is wonderful information. So thank you very much. And a couple things that I take away from this that I kind of want to highlight, just starting with the fundraising talk, it is so helpful to think about it as community building.
Yeah.
And not this daunting, as you said, Ellen, or kind of, gotta raise money, but to think of it as a community building. And you even use the word congregation, that when you have an event, it's a fundraising event, it's a congregation. And I am guilty of thinking of fundraising as, some kind of event in somebody's home or something. But to think about walking or biking or Scrabble or knitting, that is so creative and helpful. Thank you. So thank you very much for that. I agree that there are special life stage characteristics that are really useful. You were just describing the freedom to kind of enter and exit as needed. One of the others I've noticed over the years is that older women and older others are basically our ambition is for someone else, not for the self. There's kind of this connection with legacy as well, the sense of legacy, but nobody's trying to build a resume or get ready for the next job interview or, trying to stand out in the crowd. Everyone, I think, is much more interested in being a part of rather than apart from uh, a group. And the corresponding solidarity, the corresponding growth of community and friendships and really cherished connections that comes from joining together in a cause is beautiful. And you've highlighted that very well. Thank you for that. I agree. There are a lot of parallels between gun violence and the Africa's problem situation with HIV/AIDS, with one exception. And I wonder what you would think about this, which is um, I can't imagine anybody would be opposed to helping deal with the orphans in Africa. In this country, as you both know, we're embarrassed to say, there are many people opposed to any kind of gun reform, gun safety thing. So we have to deal with a well-established political opposition. Now, it is changing. There is no doubt about it. It is changing, but that has been quite a trial. The question that I had at first, when you say you went to these different groups, you went to knitting circles or book clubs or gatherings where older women are, great strategy. But what do you mean by went to? How did you connect or get invited to, or how did you introduce yourself to
Yeah.
them? Because
Yeah. How do you get in the door?
how do you get in the door?
Yeah. Go ahead, Ellen. Oh, you're on mute, Ellen. You're on mute. Sorry.
Right. Okay, so yeah, sometimes you have to be really aggressive. So all of
Aggressive.
us, I think, in our lives have other connections. And so you approach those connections. And if you can see a way in, maybe for them to invite you to speak or whatever, that's the way in. I mean, I'm shameless. I will even talk to people when I'm lined up for something and tell them what I'm doing and try and wheedle my way in that way. Sometimes it works, most often it doesn't, but you never want to be in line with me. Um, so, and I think a motto that our group has always worked by, and I think maybe this came from the foundation, Leilana, is that you never know who is in your audience, whoever your audience is. And, strange things have come out of just casually speaking with a group or a person or whatever. So, yeah, as I say, I think we're shameless. And we learned that very early on, that be shameless, just be very aggressive. And the worst that people can do is say no to you. And don't be hurt by that. But and there is and in trying to work with the African grandmothers, we have had people say to us, but why are you doing this for
Oh,
African women? Why aren't you doing something for people here? There are people
oh,
in our city in need. And you just have to say, we've got safety nets here, and in Africa, they don't have a lot.
right.
So, there's always a way around that. But yeah, we do have pushback.
Okay.
I would say not as much as likely you would
No.
experience with yeah.
There's someone that says iPhone that has their hand up that I can see on my screen. Is that somebody with a question?
I don't see that.
Do you see it, Liana? It says iPhone and someone has their hand raised.
I do.
Oh,
Yep.
There you
yes.
are.
I'm sorry. This is Jacqueline. I had to switch platform here and get on my iPhone. Yeah, my question is about the fundraisers. Do you have kind of a how-to, or did you write up the steps you took to make these happen? And in particular, I'm interested in fundraisers that people can do when they can't leave home.
Yes.
Mm.
There, Ellen, I'm sure will jump in. There's a couple of things. Thank you for asking that question. It's a wonderful question because there are lots of older women, grandmothers, grandothers who are not able to march in the street in a walk or do
Hmm.
or go on a
Exactly.
bicycle. There are people who can, and that's what they do. And there are women who make wonderful crafts, and women like my mother who will never touch a needle and thread ever again because she hates it. So they're just different capacities, but also different interests. Did we write a manual? No. Did we put together a book about the movement? Yes, and it does have a pretty robust section on fundraising, which I'm happy to share with anyone anytime. I think what I would say is that um, Ellen, correct me if I'm wrong or kick me under the table if I'm going too far here. But I think that what made all of it so, what I've had many years to ponder this and think about it. And there are many groups that have come to me over the years and said, we want to start a grandmother's or older women's campaign for amnesty, for something else. Can we do it? And my answer has always been, I don't think so, unless you understand older women's organizing, unless you understand how older women have their own way of coming together. And most of the time when people ask me, and this, I am going to answer your question because it's to this point, it was about creating one campaign where everyone has the same t-shirt, everyone has the same postcard, everyone's signing on in exactly the same way. And the beauty of the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign, which really the grandmothers made into a movement in Canada and on the African continent, is that every group was able to come together and devise its own persona, as it were, and it really was a matter of, and that to the fundraising piece, there were groups that really were sort of allergic to the idea of asking for money, but they loved the idea of going to the local country fair and selling apple butter, which they did anyway. Only this time when they went, they had flyers that they put together. They had a couple of grandmothers and grandothers standing there to talk about what they were doing and where the funds were going. There were other groups like the Scrabble group. They do have a manual, which we can probably share, of a how-to of a particular kind of fundraiser. But the uniqueness of each event and each group and the women who felt comfortable doing some things but not others, speaking out, etc., that is actually what made it work. And so I had a slide where I put, but I haven't shown it to you in the interest of time, which was the cookie cutter approach really would never have worked. And in fact, what did work is that each group of women had things that they were comfortable with around fundraising and events and community building. Even though I don't think anyone would have called themselves a community builder at the beginning, that is absolutely what the fundraising was all about in the end, and also a way of recruiting new members. So I think the answer to the question is it really depends on the women in the particular group, what they're comfortable with and what they want to do. Each group would write a totally different manual. That doesn't mean we don't have resources to share, which of course I'm happy to do. I don't want to duck the question, but it is really the truth. The individuality or the personalities of the women in each group is what carried it on, and it's why 15 to 20 years later, the groups are still going strong.
Hmm. Great answer. Thank you.
I would just add, in terms of as groups become more comfortable with fundraising and stuff, it becomes much easier to do the direct ask. We in our speaking engagements, quite often there is a direct ask because we feel comfortable doing that. Or if you're not as comfortable, we do subtle things like put donation envelopes on every chair. So there are other ways of becoming more comfortable as you and as you expand what you're doing. We've always felt free to do kind of some far out things, and mostly they work, but we're free to experiment, which I think is wonderful.
Margaret, I know we're over time. Can I leave on one note, which is that because I
Absolutely.
know you do so much, I know a lot of this work is really critically dependent or is going to rely on advocacy. And I just want to say that the doing a bit of a paradigm shift, there were a couple of paradigm shifts that happened. One is fundraising, is community building, is constituency building, coming together, creating a forum, actually just letting people know you exist. So that instead of thinking it as fundraising, it really is just here we are, and you're
Mhm.
doing something and you're engaging in something and it's interesting. And often people, the other paradigm shift was that people didn't expect to see 20 grandmothers cycling across Victoria, raising money for a cause they believe in, or they didn't expect to see grandmothers playing Scrabble and getting everybody in their community, including the mayor and the manager of the local bank, to sponsor their Scrabble tournament, or not the tournament, but each woman to raise points through her Scrabble game, and get sponsored, sort of like those marathons. I think that so paradigm shifts, like different ways of thinking about older women and grandmothers and grandmother power and grandother power, that happened as a result of all of this work and this coming together and fundraising and awareness raising. But it also allowed for the advocacy was in the visibility. The advocacy, it also made the advocacy much easier, right? Because people started to see grandmothers. Like I remember when there were members of parliament, we have a different system, of course, but members of parliament were like, oh, the grandmothers are coming. Can
Mhm.
somebody make sure that there's a room with a printer? Because, or, oh, or I remember mayors in small towns saying to me, oh, could you just tell the grandmothers like we can't come to every meeting, but they were afraid not to. In the end, they just knew they had to come, right? And the bank manager better show up.
Just a second.
So it was really, I think that from an advocacy point of view, some of the paradigm shifting or some of the changing of attitudes, the busting of stereotypes, the sort of breaking open of understanding that when you unleash the energy and determination of older women around an issue, and I think this is also speaking a bit to the opposition that you experience, but I'm not enough of an expert. I don't want to step where I don't know enough. But that when you unleash the power, the determination, the moxie of older women who are just in a different space in life, they're not trying to get everyone to love them. They're not measuring their worth by how loved they are by the PTA. They're not afraid of embarrassing their kids, or maybe they don't care anymore if their older kids are embarrassed. Like there's what I learned and what I appreciated so much at a younger age, looking forward to hearing from older women, was a liberatory kind of
Mhm.
moment in life, a liberation of self, which allowed a lot of the older women to try things they never had, throw caution to the wind. But in doing all of those things that Ellen and all of the other grandmothers and grandmothers did, they also shifted the perception of their grandchildren see them
Yeah.
differently,
Yeah.
like the community sees them differently. And that opened the door for a different kind of awareness raising and advocacy. You weren't knocking the door at one grandmother, it was a movement and people knew it and they knew you were coming and you were serious and there was a whole lot of you, and you were pretty unfiltered. More
Mhm.
unfiltered than the younger crowd who was worrying about how do I look, how do I sound, am I going to get in trouble, is this going too far? Not to say that young activists aren't wonderful, but to say that older women brought something special to
Mhm.
the table. And I think just because I know how much advocacy you have to do, that this other piece is actually a part of that
Mhm.
shifting power, right?
Mhm.
And shifting
Mhm.
perception and giving the floor and the mic to women who actually people have room to hear from in a different way, an importantly different way, which is my hope around Grandmothers for Gun Responsibility, is that those detractors and opposition will actually, everyone has older women, grandmothers, grandothers in their lives, and will make the space to see you and hear you as they should.
Mhm.
So that's
That's
just, I just wanted to end on that note because we didn't talk about advocacy at all.
no, that's fine. As you well know, being a member of the advisory council,
Yeah.
we are gearing up for advocacy. We've already got some underway, but we're also about culture change or new narratives around the role of guns in American society, and the idea of collective responsibility is a tool for change when we are all in that together. But you're so right. If I could just um, before I thank you, just take the privilege to share one little grandchild story. So, grandsons are also watching and engaged, and that's what I happen to have. So, just a couple weeks ago, my younger grandson and I went to a local history museum that is showing an exhibit on Nelson Mandela. And it's a really wonderful exhibit. And those of you in Seattle, Mohi, I would encourage you to go. And there was a group of women, white women in that anti-apartheid movement called the Black Sash Women. and they wore black sashes across their dresses, and they were supporting the anti-apartheid work. And my grandson, who's basically since he was 3 years old, has heard about grandmothers, looked at that and then turned to me and said, "I think you could be a part of that." And
Right.
I really saw how this notion, of an older woman, his grandmother in this case,
Right.
being out there looking for a better world, looking for solutions, looking for what can I do? How can I bring my experience, expertise, passion, devotion to peace and justice and solidarity and safe communities? It was really a good moment.
That's
So
really beautiful. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I
uh,
love that.
it was rewarding to me.
Yeah.
I want to actually take you up on what I think was kind of an offer to come back down the road a little bit and talk about the regional issue. We really like the idea that um, there needs to be, individuality and room for local and regional preferences and design and leadership as we go forward. That's an important thing. But you leave us with so many gems. May we come to you again sometime and see?
Of
Okay,
course,
we
pleasure. And
maybe we'll start.
I'll throw up on the screen for 2 moments just so that
Okay.
you have a chance. And if you're recording it, you can go later. I don't know if I'm obscuring any of it, but Ellen had said, Ellen, you put this into my mind because you talked about how powerful the regional liaisons had been
Mhm.
in the movement and how important that was to come together across regions, and also not always for it not always to be the hub and the center, but to have local groups meeting in regional constellations. So these are just some of I put some quotes on a page about regional gatherings, which can be extraordinarily motivating and powerful, and also be a way to raise awareness in a
Mhm.
region, in a community. Oh, we're here. So absolutely, Margaret, anytime I'll come back, and
Okay.
I hope Ellen will join me because she's
Yes,
I
Ellen.
speak quite a bit, but Ellen and grandmothers like Ellen and grandothers like Ellen know much more than I do, of course.
Well, I think it's a beautiful combination of you two. So thank you. And Ellen, thank you for your comments because about, caution about the cookie cutter approach. That's incredibly helpful to us as we, move into more concrete planning on what we're going to do at different parts of the country. So thank you. Are there any final comments from Liana, Sophie, Mary, Cheryl, Patty, Cindy, Ceci? Anybody would like to say anything before we?
It was a terrific presentation. Thank you very much.
Oh, great, Cindy. Thank you.
Yeah, I love the video as well. I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
good. Thank
You
you.
made a
Yes.
difference, big difference in the world. Really rewarding to see and to meet you.
The video and the song was very uplifting, so it does inspire. So that was really good. Yep. Thanks for the information.
Wonderful. Can we go out on a note with a 1 minute video? You can go off as you need to, but I'll end with 1 minute because I just saw it the other day. I hadn't seen it before, and I thought you might really love this.
Sure.
Hold on. It's literally 1 minute. This is also just I thought what would I don't know. There we go. I don't know why it keeps cutting me off. I also thought it was just useful because the use of social media by older women is really impressive, but much better than mine. Okay, so this is my last little salvo to share.
I'm an 80-year-old grandmother. Of course I can cycle 100 kilometers a day.
I'm a silver-haired grandother. Of course, I make cocktails. These are some of my tools, and these are some of the cocktails I have made. This is a cosmic granny. To your good health and an AIDS-free world.
Oh,
I'm a grandmother from Grandmothers for Grandmothers Regina. Of course, we raise thousands of dollars from our Art from the Attic sale every year for the Stephen Lewis Foundation.
Grandmothers, and of course we hike Victoria Trails. Yay!
I'm a grandmother, and of course I volunteer.
I'm a grandmother. And of course, I'm not going to rest until they can rest.
I'm not a grandmother, I'm a grandother. And of course, I'm going to go for a dip in this cold Pacific Ocean. It's refreshing.
I am a grandmother. And of course, I want a future free from AIDS.
I am a grandmother, and of course I ride my bike to meetings.
Wow.
That's the end. I mean, and they put it was just a 2-second, it's 1 minute that they put together, but I figure for all the people out there who watch it, it's a great game changer.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I can't wait for us to be able to share this whole time together. Thank you. Thank you both very, very much. And we'll start a graduate program, and you can be our first.
I'll have to take it first, Margaret. Maybe I can.
Well, I think you're really ready to be our first graduate seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.